Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today, we have our friend Renee Jones from Texas. She is a life coach specializing in lifestyle and weight loss. You can find her material at packyourownbag.com, and we're going to get right back to her in 2 seconds. Please stop what you're doing. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Took last week off because didn't have anybody to talk to. So be it. Lots of old material to catch up on. Also, you can get a t-shirt, coffee mug, tote bag, all that good stuff. I take direct donations, but I would prefer to sell you a book. I've got 12, working on 13 currently available books of historical dream literature, dating back to the 1500s. Excellent reproductions of some very good stuff. Also working on free audiobooks. And that is the housekeeping. That's enough of me. Back to our friend, Renee Jones in Texas, and I don't know really anything about you or what you do. So why don't you tell me and my audience at the same time?
Well, I'm a coach, and I focus on helping women overcome emotional eating so they can lose the weight they want to lose and keep it off. And I got there because I spent 40 years on the diet yo-yo, and I finally lost my weight in 2012, and I am the same weight today as I was then.
Very nice. So you've done it, and that's one of the best ways to learn a process, and then it makes you literally an expert on advising other people, at least on your own method, what worked for you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I found that is very powerful also in, say, the drug and alcohol addiction side of things, where former addicts are like, let me tell you how I kicked it. Let me tell you what it meant to me. And you can also tell, I love being able to say this to folks who might share, say, autism or depression, things I've experienced. I don't just sympathize, but I know how you feel. I know what that feels like. I've been there, and I can tell them there's a way out. Here's what I did, or here's a bag of tricks that might work for you. That's the kind of stuff you've got at. You said it's packyourownbag.com, and this will be in the links in the description below too. What do people find if they go there?
Well, they'll find lots of free information. A couple of freebies they can download, blog, all that sort of thing, and then my coaching services.
Very nice. So you take a more personal approach.
Yes.
With people. Do you run larger seminars, or is it more kind of a one-on-one?
I have a couple of small groups. I try to keep them under 12 because I want to be able to give them the attention they need, but I do a lot of one-to-one because that's where I love doing it.
That is the most effective I've found, because you really got to get to know someone and have time to talk to them and listen to them. And what are they dealing with, and what's their feedback on having tried your methods? Like, well, maybe this one wasn't working for me so well. You got anything else? And the small groups too. I really identify with that in terms of you get to a certain size, and for the presenter, it's hard to connect with each person, and it's hard for the audience, so to speak, to say, feel they're having a connection with you too, or that you're speaking to them and not just like lecture hall size auditorium stuff. That's I can't see that working very well. I've never thought I would endorse that as a good method. Small group seems better.
Well, they get their personal attention as well as the camaraderie of, oh, this person gets it in a different way to me. Let me listen to them. They teach each other in the midst of it. It's fantastic.
That's the other benefit of that small group model, is people can actually talk to each other in a way you can't when you're passively absorbing in a theater chair, so to speak. Yeah. That interaction is a big deal, and the support from it too, of like hearing other people are the same as you. They have the same problems, same struggles. That happened to me. I know exactly what that is. That's great.
Yeah, it's fun too.
Yeah, and I was off camera admiring the bookshelf back there. I want one. I love that. I love that dark wood, and I love it's just packed with tasty information. I see that and I want to read them all. I don't even know what they are, and I want to read them.
Oh, we are. My husband and I are terrors for books. We are terrors for them.
I responded to something on Twitter the other day. It's like for people who struggle with relationships or whatnot, what was your childhood like? And for me, it was kind of like I went from playing by myself with Legos, building stuff, to reading by myself more voraciously. That was pretty much my childhood, and a lot of struggles to attempt to make connections with people. But I do better, I think, in brief stuff. I meet new people all the time, and it's not a really long-term connection, but it's kind of brief and intense in whatever way is possible, aimed at being beneficial. But that's kind of, so books have been my relationship with books has been longer than with anything else in my life. So,
except maybe your parents.
That too. They've put up with me for going on 45 years now. So it's God bless them. Okay. Well, I think we've. And so just a reminder again. Links in the description below. It's packyourownbag.com. You can also find it at Pack Your Own Bag on Instagram and Facebook, etc., and that good stuff. So we got the housekeeping out of the way, and we're about 5-6 minutes in, and we're gonna get down to the dream. So I'm ready to hear you just tell it. I'm just going to shut up and listen, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Well, the interesting thing about this is that I'm actually a sleepwalker.
Oh yeah.
So these dreams typically kick off a sleepwalking episode.
Wow. Yeah.
So we had 2 dogs, and my husband was up a little later one night, and I'd been asleep for about 45 minutes, which is usually when they kick off. And I jumped up out of bed physically because a dog had taken a cassette tape off of my husband's pillow and was running away with it, with the tape just flying behind him. And I was chasing after the dog physically, running up and down the stairs. And my husband caught me. I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" I was like, "Well, I need a 3rd dog in our house to make this scenario work in my head. I bet I'm asleep." He said, "Probably so. Why don't you go back to bed?"
Catching up with the description here. Always takes me a moment to write.
That's right.
Okay, so it was a very brief experience.
Yes.
And just for the audience, it doesn't have to be long in the telling. Sometimes things seem, I bet there's a lot of folks out there like, "Oh, I'd like to talk to them, but my dreams are not that interesting." They're all interesting. There's nothing, I haven't come across one that wasn't fascinating in some way. Learning something about someone, that puzzle element is fantastic. So that's the brief description of the dream. And I forgot we were going to, you did mention the sleepwalking thing, and we'll definitely have a conversation around that too, because that's a unique element. Learning more how to bridge those gaps. Just a slight deviation. So in a lot of the books I'm reading, they are struggling with this issue of people that appear to be awake to all outward appearances, but they're having a different they're not really connected with the world. They may even respond to people in their environment as if they were characters in their dream, and they look like they're awake. And I've actually had experience, not to put my wife on blast, but she'll talk to me in her sleep sometimes and have no memory of having done so. Like, you woke me up and we had a conversation. I'm like, kind of, yeah, I thought we did. And she's like, no idea. Complete
sound asleep.
Yeah, complete blank.
Yeah.
So what was I going to say about that? There's the broader category, somnambulism, from literally soma, ambulate, sleep, walk, and that incorporated a lot of things: sleep talking, literally physical movement in sleep. Great stories in these books about people that have scaled cliffs, like mountain literally mountain climbing, the things that they would have never had the bravery, so to speak, risks they would not have taken, or in their own estimation, been able to successfully navigate. Just almost superhuman abilities of balance and athletic stuff that they're reported to have happened while asleep. And this interesting concept of the what Mary Arnold Forster called the borderland state. Some people call it the twilight between sleep and waking, where the theories I'm reading from these older folks, and I'm still processing, I'm like formulating my own theory, absorbing all this information, but that there's these theories that we actually don't or can't remember the dreams that happen in the deepest REM sleep, which used to be where they thought all dreaming happened, that you weren't dreaming unless you were way down in REM. But it seems to be these dreams that are happening closer to consciousness that we are the only ones we have the ability to remember. And then sometimes they influence. So what would they say about sleepwalking? So when you're asleep, you've got this disconnect that happens, so your body doesn't move. That's not supposed to happen. Evolutionary safety mechanism to keep you from acting out your dreams. But it also seems to be closely related to sleep paralysis. So there's that inverse relationship where under sleep paralysis, your consciousness returns, but that physical disconnection is still there. And it's the opposite with sleepwalking, where the physical connection is there and the consciousness is not. So there's, I don't know what to make of it, but that's all fascinating. I don't have answers on like what is it and how does it work exactly, but I love these conceptual explorations. I don't know if you had any comments on, I mean, if you looked into your own condition, educated yourself on it, and what was your perspective on it? I've talked enough.
Well, most of my episodes have a common theme, and whether it's jumping up to go prepare the guest room, because my parents have arrived in the middle of the night after my mother was already dead, you understand?
Yeah.
And I didn't have their guest room ready, but it seems to be very much connected to how I look at expectations. And one of the things that helps me, because I used to do it like 3 or 4 times a week. And about a decade ago, I talked to this colleague and she said, it's all around expectations for you. And if I go to sleep thinking, I've met all the expectations, I've done what I'm supposed to do, then I tend to sleep through the night. And now it only happens maybe 2 or 3 times a month.
Okay. That's good to know. It's so, in your experience, and I think it makes a tremendous amount of theoretical sense. Like if we were to put it in a theoretical expression that would help people, kind of heading to sleep with, speaking of expectation, with the expectation that you've satisfied enough immediate problems that you're not going to have to be surprised by something and jump into an emergency unprepared. Right. That's exactly what I was saying. You know, this theme of, I was putting down emergent needs came to mind, that concept and expectations.
Well, in the conscious mind, reassuring the unconscious mind, we've done everything we're supposed to do. You can rest. Yeah,
for sure. I was thinking of, back to this book I edited, Studies in Dreams. It's Mary Arnold Forster, and she talks about her experience programming her dreams for dreams of flight and to be able to become lucid. These are things that I do not fully understand yet myself. So I draw that little line of, okay, now I'm getting into uncharted territory and in things I can explain well. But that's seems to be a pretty common theme, that we can influence our sleep experience by some method of waking conscious attention to something specific. I don't remember my dreams. It just doesn't happen. Like I'll wake up with flashes. This thing happened. There's no story. There's no sequence of events, just a thing. It was a car door. What kind of car? I have no idea. What were you doing with the car? I was in it. I wasn't in it. I don't know. That's all I got, is that one image of being at a car door. Nothing else in the dream sticks with me.
Fascinating that you're a dream wizard then, huh?
It really is. I think in some ways I've been looking at that too. The idea of I'm drawn to this thing because it's an experience I'm denied in some ways, that I want to understand it because it's this big realm of mystery to me. And I'm getting to live kind of vicariously through other people's experiences, and maybe, hopefully down the road, I'll get more control over it myself. I have not actively experimented with some of these methods. And I've had people offer to teach me. I just haven't taken them up on it yet. It's, I don't know if I'm reluctant, hesitating, busy, making excuses. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not ready to do it. You never know. Sometimes until you're ready to do something, you're not going to succeed anyway. So maybe I just haven't thought about it long enough. I got to think about things for a long time before I decide what I want to do. It's very true. So speaking of thinking about things, we've got this specific dream experience, and in it, you are in bed. The dream experience begins with you laying in bed. Um, any sense of your environment? It is definitely your bed in your house or somewhere else?
Not in the house we currently live in, but our first house. My husband is not beside me, but the dog jumps up to get this cassette tape. And this was long after cassette tapes were normal. We'd already gone to CDs by then. Yeah.
That is interesting too. Yeah. So the experience you're getting is, and that's interesting too. This is why I start asking people about what they saw. Because of course, you describe the dream. I'm in bed, actions, dog grabs cassette, runs, I chase. And then I pull it back a little bit. We do, this is what I call the deep dive sections. Like, okay, what bed, where? Your first house, not your current house. That gets a little curious. Okay, now you're in a different environment. You could have been on a spaceship. You could have been at the bottom of the ocean. All of these things say something different. So there's something about your brain wanting to say, okay, imagine you are in this scenario in your first house. That's the context that we build on for some of the rest of it, or a reference point to try and figure out why your first house and not your current house. I don't know yet.
Well, I should say, sure. We were still living in that house at the time, so it was our current home.
It was your current home at the time. Well, that's good. Yeah. That's why I get these. That's why I ask for this kind of clarification. So it was in your current home. Well, that says something too. It did not put you in any kind of an alternative environment. It was very much. This is related to where you are right now in life, in your thought process, not somewhere else, not connecting it to a different bit of imagery. So first house. Gotcha. Good to ask too. I would have had the wrong assumption going through the whole thing. Please feel free to interrupt me. I talk way too much. I just kind of babble until I understand what I'm trying to say.
I realized that I had made that unclear. So
fair enough. Yes. Please stop me anytime and clarify. And I think you mentioned just for a mental image, which side of the bed you sleep on? If you're in
on
bed,
the left side.
So you're on the left. Husband's would be on the right.
And the door is on the right as well.
And the door is on the right. So, and this was a dog that you did own at the time. One of three, you said?
No, we only had two. But there was a third dog that I was looking for. The third dog stole things. So that dog didn't actually exist.
Gotcha. Now that's interesting too.
And I have no idea what it looked like.
Okay, that was going to be another question too. Is now that this is an imaginary dog, so you had, how did you know it was a dog and that it stole the cassette if you didn't see it? What was your experience of understanding that was happening?
Well, I think I saw the kind of an impression, almost like a phantom impression, because there was no cassette tape either, you understand.
Gotcha.
There was a bedside, there was a pillow. But I just somehow read it as a third dog.
Gotcha. Fair enough. And that's the funny thing about dreams is that knowing something is just true, is exactly the same as seeing a visual image of it in your dream. Mm-hmm. It's as true as the imaginary vision, the imaginary knowing, vision, sounds, none of it's happening, so to speak, but it's all equally real. So sometimes, just to clarify, I ask those kind of questions like, well, how did you know? I just knew. Fair enough. It is what it is, but that you didn't see it. So then I start thinking, what is it about not having seen it? Why did your brain say, imagine this is something you knew what it was, but you did not create a visual image of it at that moment? You didn't open your eyes and see the dog. You just knew it was a dog. So there's something in there too about the idea that you didn't see it. Like things that are missing and present can be equally important, depending. It's also interesting too that this cassette tape was on the pillow where your husband would sleep normally. So where his head would be is a recording device. I don't know what, does anything come to mind when I phrase it like that?
He's a very clever man. In fact, I call him my chief of all information, because he used to be an information guy at his office. So
Gotcha. So it actually kind of makes sense, the idea of a physical representation of memory. Like Memorex came to my Memorex cassettes. Might have even been one of those in your dream.
Might have been.
Yeah. So this, but it's not him. It's a representation of one of his characteristics, something you respect. How would you describe your feeling towards his ability in that regard?
Oh, it's amazing. He's an amazing man.
Gotcha. Some people could have gone a different direction with that. Well, it's kind of annoying sometimes. He never forgets anything, especially my mistakes. But no, you're going a different direction with it. You're like, it's nothing less than awe-inspiring. This ability that he has, and respect for it. You view it as a generally positive quality.
Because he's generally a peacemaker type. So even if he knows my flaws, he's not going to point them out.
Gotcha.
Unless they become problematic in some way.
Right?
And then it's like, yeah.
Then
right.
you got to do what you got to do. Yeah.
Well, I was born redheaded, so,
Fair enough. Yeah. I was born a dumb blonde. There you go. With a tendency to dry mouth. Love that coffee. By the way, Folgers, if you're out there still looking for a sponsorship. DreamWizardry, powered by Folgers. I'm gonna clip that and make a commercial.
There you go.
And then send them a bill. They won't pay it, but they might. Anyway, no, that's dumb. I say so many dumb things that make me laugh. That's hopefully other people think it's amusing. Okay, back on track. So this almost a ghost dog, but the vague impression, but certain impression of a dog snatches the pillow,
the cassette tape
off the pillow and runs out of the room. Mm-hmm. Did you have any sense of why at that moment, what that dog's goal was, purpose, playful, malicious, and any kind of a feeling towards the dog? How did you feel about the experience of this dog snatching it?
I wanted to get it back. I guess it could have been playful stealing, but it was definitely stealing.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was going to go bury it in the yard. Maybe it was going to tear it up. But I did not want it to get away with it. Because it was his. So
it definitely belonged to him as well. Mm-hmm. It was the husband's cassette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with my bent toward the question of expectations, I might think, well, I wasn't responsibly protecting it because I was asleep.
Gotcha.
Because that's kind of a theme as well.
Interesting. I'm just trying to formulate some questions in my mind to come back to. And again, we don't have to have immediate answers. Why the motivation? What's the motivation for the dog, even in playfully stealing a representation of your husband's amazing ability at memory, and this feeling that you had failed in some responsibility to protect it properly? Very, very interesting connection there. And what I ask people to do is just let it percolate. You don't, if you have an immediate answer and you're like, oh, I know exactly what that means, shout it out. If you don't, okay, questions. That's all I got most of the time is questions. So yeah, when I phrase it that way, does anything come to mind or not yet?
Well, this would have been the first 6 or 7 years we were married. So, and he was always so wonderful. And I probably questioned whether or not I was being the best wife to him, even though I tried, I was doing my best.
Gotcha. So maybe going through your mind at that time was your desire to be a good partner, mm-hmm. and to I hesitate to phrase it in any particular way, but I got to throw words out there, to basically be worthy of him in a way. Like his, you saw his abilities as amazing, and you're like, am I measuring up? Maybe something
Sure.
like that.
Sure.
Am I contributing enough?
Yeah.
That issue of worthiness and proper balance and reciprocal relationships is very, very important stuff. Especially early in a marriage. Yeah, you want to, like, well, he picked me and he asked, but did he make a mistake? Did I pull one over on him? Can I live up to this? I get it. Those are all.
And
go ahead.
That would make a lot of sense, because up until about a decade ago, I struggled with that a lot, and we finally kind of settled it. But there's still times it comes up because it's something from childhood, isn't it?
Yeah.
Never quite good enough.
Yeah.
Although, now I'm like, go away. Of course I'm good enough. But then it was a struggle.
Oh yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons, some of the best-selling self-help books are how to feel okay about yourself. Because it's something all of us struggle with. And in some ways it's good. I'm always trying to yin yang this type of stuff. It's good to have social comparisons. That is sometimes the only way we can understand ourselves. We get feedback from the outside that we can't see. So some of these pressures are good. And then the downside of it is, if you got pressure to improve, you have to recognize I'm not good enough. And then what does it mean to be good enough? How do you actually get to a state where you can say, I'm okay here. This is okay. I mean, in terms of advice, and I try not to give advice, but I tend to tell people looking for self-confident stuff is developing skills. I mean, if you don't have anything you can do that you're proud of, and it doesn't have to be, don't set the bar too high. You don't have to write the next great American novel. You can write a short story. If that's what you're into, just do the thing, something you can tangibly feel accomplished, and then you build on that. It's just going back to my childhood with the Legos. You put down the thing, you start building the foundation, and then before you know it, you get a spaceship. And
there you go.
It's simple, silly stuff. Clean your room. That gets poo-pooed a lot in the media. People go, "Oh, clean your room." Do it. See if you can, and see how you feel afterwards. I tell folks with here I go with my advice kick. But if you got this free-floating anxiety, do something tangible. Clean the house. You always need to clean the house. Tidy up something physical. Burn the energy. Focus your mind. Do something tangible. I tell folks to get their worries, fears out. Get it. Put it on paper. Speak it into the void. Go scream it into the bathroom shower. Whatever you got to do, get it out of you into the world so you can look at it. And it's like the first step to dealing with it. I'm rambling off on a tangent here. I don't know if you...
Sorry. I'm a psych nerd. It's great.
It's all good stuff. Hopefully people find it interesting. What else are my episodes made of? It's me rambling. There we go. Okay, so we haven't gotten any further than the dog steals a cassette. And we've still got like a half an hour conversation on that. And that's great. So what is your experience of jumping out of bed? Do you have a sense of yourself? You're in your nightgown, you're naked, you're dressed to go skiing. What's that experience like, jumping out of bed? Pajamas? That was pretty typical at the time.
Yeah. And just jump up. And I tend to be a bit of a tripper when I'm awake. When I'm asleep, I am sure-footed.
I mentioned the guy that could do mountain climbing in his sleep. Yeah, that's kind of amazing.
So I would jump up and I would not even grab my robe. I'd run around the bed and out the door after this dog, and then around and down the stairs, and then back up and down, run to the garage and back.
And that's what I want to get to, is like, what is that path, piece by piece? Because that might tell us something as well. The first piece you have to, and a lot of this stuff makes sense. The first thing you got to do is get out of bed. Can't chase the dog from in bed. You got to get out of the room. Fair enough. At any point, did you see the dog? Did you see it disappearing around corners so you knew where to go? Or were you trying to invent locations to search that made sense?
Oh, I suppose at the at the top, when I was at the top of the stairs, I sort of saw the impression of it go round toward the back door or the garage, but into that part of the house. So it did kind of a U-turn at the stairs.
And once again, so you're standing at the top of the stairs and you caught a glimpse of it heading for the garage?
Yeah.
Is there a connection between the garage and your husband? Does he spend a lot of time there? Is that a place he doesn't go because he's not mechanically inclined? Does he do a lot of does he keep things stored there? Does he use a lot of lawn equipment? Anything?
At the time, he didn't do a lot. I mean, he parked his car there.
Okay.
So his car was there, and he had various pieces of electronic equipment that there might be old pieces out there. But of course, my own fail-safe, I can't manipulate a doorknob and a lock in my sleep.
Okay. So that keeps you from running out into the street during an episode. That's
right.
That's awesome. Because a lot of people and if you're out there and you're dealing with sleepwalking, talk to somebody. There's tips and tricks. One of them is sometimes to get locks you cannot manipulate in your sleep. Like maybe you could open a door handle, but you can't figure out those little chain locks. So you can just put them everywhere and keep yourself from wandering out of your bedroom, wandering out into the street. You know, you might have to experiment a little bit with different kinds of safety mechanisms. The old book said you could tie yourself to the bed, like a string around your wrist to the bedpost, and that might keep you, or it would wake you up if you jerk on it. Then again, people might just snap it in their sleep if it's a weak string or hurt themselves. This is not advice. These are the old books. A lot of stuff in the old books is not, don't follow it, but that's what they were experimenting with methods to keep people safe. One of them was if you sleepwalk, sleep with someone who can look after you. That's a tall order. But some folks it works very well.
Yeah, I think that's why he always sleeps between me and the door.
Yeah. And that's also kind of a typically protective male type of thing too. It's you put yourself between your wife and the door that anybody might come through in the middle of the night, but especially when there's sleepwalking issues. Reminds me of, and I can't stop thinking of like comedian Mike Birbiglia. If you've heard of him, he was like, he was on NPR, commentator, wrote a book, and then launched a stand-up comedy career off of his sleepwalking stories. And he at one point had climbed on top of a low dresser next to his bed, and he was screaming about the wasp-like jackal creature that was in the room. And his girlfriend at the time had become so good at talking him down. She's like, "There's no jackal. Go back to bed. Just go back. There's no jackal." And he said, "All right." And I went back to bed knowing there was a jackal in the room. Just great. If you guys hear that story, look up Mike Birbiglia jackal story. It's hilarious.
Yes, he suddenly, at some point he was like, I said, "Look, love, when I'm doing this, there's something that I'm worried about that I'm trying to take care of." So now he says to me, "It's okay. I got it. I'll take care of it. Why don't you go back to bed?" So it works. It works. You got to have somebody to help you.
Yeah, and it very well could not have worked, and you would have to try something else. So it's fantastic when it does, and that's the personal touch, the really connecting with someone and getting to know them. That you said earlier in your life, these episodes were more frequent. So he knew about this before he married you.
Yeah, I figured he needed to know that because it tends to freak people out.
It's kind of a big deal. By the way, when we start sleeping in the same bed, you're going to need to know this might happen. That's fantastic for full disclosure. And then you're not. That's another thing to feel bad about, or low self-worth is like you can't just be honest about who you are and accept that maybe someone can't live with that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But if they can, wow, that's amazing. And that's a great thing to, bring a relationship even closer together as we accept each other for our flaws, wherever they may be. Some a little stranger or more difficult to overcome than others. But you got to know going in. There's no reason to hold those things back. They're going to find out. And you're going to have to deal with it eventually.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what you do in sleep. Like he used to bang on the bed with his foot. Just I was like,
he's got his own tics.
What are we doing here? But yeah, I mean, some things you just don't, sleep is just so different to any other state. that.
Yeah. And unless you set up a camera and record yourself sleeping, which I've actually thought of doing, because I've got that's my bed right there with the cats.
Okay.
I've thought about that. I don't know if I'm actually going to do it, but I've thought about it. Unless you do that, how do you know what you do in sleep? Unless you conduct your own sleep study. That's an amazing thing we've got the ability to do now that we've got phone cameras. You just put your phone on to record yourself while you sleep and see what happens.
Well, and there's so many sleep disorder clinics. I actually went to one once to do a study because I thought, is there something we can do about this? Because this one was really, a lot. And I actually had an episode while I was there. And he said, you don't have sleep apnea. You're not having a seizure. You're just a classic sleepwalker. And there's nothing we can do about it. Why did we do this? All that gunk in my hair.
Yeah. Oh, but that's amazing too, because you very well could have gone for a sleep study and you that night randomly you slept fine and they never saw it. It was kind of a wonderful coincidence that they were able to see it in process and go, we nailed it down. At least, even if it's you don't like the diagnosis, who wants complications, but at least knowing it's there, recognizing it gives you a baseline. Okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Now I can explore options. You don't know what it is. You don't know what the problem is. Where do you start? It feels overwhelming. So at least it's good to know. And
they actually said, okay, were you awake or were you asleep at this juncture? I was like, oh, that was sound asleep. He said, but you reached over and got a drink of water. I said, yeah, sound asleep.
Yep. And that is fascinating too. It's like doing things we have no memory of, and yet our body is acting in the physical world, and you'd have no way of knowing. You could have done that for years and never known. Knocked the glass onto the water. You wake up in the morning and what happened? And then you think, oh, it's the dog or the cat did it, but no, you did it.
Yeah, I have a very clear memory when I was about, I guess when it first started. So I've been about 14, maybe 15. And I woke up and I was putting my clothes on and I thought, when I went to bed, that was on the wall. What's it doing on my bed now? And that was our first clue that I was walking in my sleep because I took something off the wall.
Good deal. Good deal. It's great to catch those things early too, especially. So you've been dealing with it since, you said 15, 16 years old was when
probably
you became
about
aware
14. Of it. About 14.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. That's a good lifelong. So all of this came out of asking whether your husband knew. Mm-hmm. And that came from asking about the garage and his trying to get myself back on track.
His car would have been there. He would come in and out through that door. He would have some stuff stored out there, but I'm the tool belt in the family. He borrows my drill.
Okay. Gotcha. Interesting. So this is actually his, say, typical entry and exit point for the house. That's the first place. And it's interesting. You chase your husband's stolen memory to the first place you can think of that you would normally expect him to enter. Very, very interesting logic to the dream in that sense. But almost immediately you arrive there, and how did you know you needed to keep searching somewhere else? Did you then catch another glimpse of the dog, or you had the sense that you've searched enough, the dog's not in the garage?
Well, I didn't open the door. Mm-hmm. I just went to the door, and then I turned around and ran back upstairs. I guess I was wondering if the dog got past me. And it was when I was coming back up the stairs at full pelt that my husband caught me. He came out of his office, which was just a little ways down the landing. I was like, hello, what are we doing?
Yeah. Upstairs. Gotcha. So it was that brief to the point where, and then when he caught you on the stairs there, did you start to come awake more, or you're still fully sleepwalking at that point?
No, I'm kind of, when he speaks to me, it was like, well, it got the cassette tape thing, and we only have 2 dogs, right? Yes. I need a 3rd dog to make this scenario work. So I was waking up then and realizing that I was asleep and separating that dog that was stealing from our 2.
Okay. Very interesting, because it very well could have been you did not wake up at that point, but there was something about actually finding him, an actual encounter with the real physical person that brought you out of it. So there's something, I mean, your husband's all over this thing, from the bed to the cassette to the garage, and then you find him. So there's some concern, worry, concept you're working with. How long ago did this dream take place? You said this was...
this would have been about 20 years ago.
Okay.
We just celebrated our 27th.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Where was I going with that? So it wasn't recent. And you were saying this was definitely when you lived in your first house and there were stairs. And you were earlier in your relationship when you were still struggling with self-worth issues, perhaps equal partnership issues, meeting the bar of his accomplishments or abilities. Go ahead. You had a thought.
I was just thinking, he's always the one to bring peace and calm into any situation. I look to him for that, because he's just a very wonderful man who loves me. So him being there always makes me feel better, because I know he's got it.
Yeah. And this was all in the context of expectations causing stress to bubble up in this way of being surprised by emergent circumstances that you need to immediately respond to, but then him being the one to de-escalate you from that stress by his presence. So it makes a lot of sense from the beginning of the experience to why interacting with him would bring you out of it. Yeah. So what do we got here? I want to put it together in a story. I try to get a story arc that makes sense, and I feel like we've got all the pieces. Maybe we don't. Maybe there's something going through all those descriptions. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, I wanted to get him back, right? I didn't want that part of him to go. Yeah. I wanted to protect him in some way, even though perhaps it had been my fault that it happened. I wanted to do what I could to balance the sheet, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do now, is that there's still those kind of unanswered questions of, what is it about you conceptualizing a dog, even playful, a dog that doesn't exist, stealing a representation of your husband's amazing memory, and that you felt somehow responsible for it, as if you'd failed to protect it. There's something going on in there. Those are still kind of the unanswered questions we hadn't quite. I don't know if it percolated long enough, or if some new context is needed.
Solve that one, young man, and you might free me from sleepwalking forever.
That's possible. Some of these things I may be asking the impossible of myself in that regard. Well, are there any specific things we touched on you feel like you didn't explain fully, or did I miss a turn? There may be something unique to the idea of going up and down the stairs that it is the only path to the garage. You needed to go there in your mind. And then when you didn't find him there, you ran back upstairs, which is where his office is. And so you're following him. You're following your mental map of where you would most likely find him. Is he in the garage? Is he entering at a location I can locate him, and then you go back upstairs where his office is, and on that path is where you encounter him. So it's definitely, go ahead.
I think I was probably going back to the bedroom just to start again, maybe. And sure. It was like the bedroom was this way and his office was that way, but he had heard me and thought, oh, bless her, she's running again. And he came to catch me.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're going to go back to the beginning to start the search again. Well, I couldn't find the dog. Let's go start the trail again and see if I can pick it up. What are some of my notes here? So you're definitely in in the home. You share together in the dream, and it gets. I think I might be struggling with the idea of a lot of dreams are more. They're less related to the immediate physical environment. Sometimes they are, but when we've got this sleepwalking crossover, there's navigating the actual physical environment, which is going to complicate understanding why those images came in there, because it could be as simple as you're in your house. Of course, you're close to awareness enough to physically interact. So you could just be getting these. Sometimes it takes, what am I struggling with? The idea that it may not be as symbolic as it is literal, physical, representational, environmental imagery, so to speak. Because you are actually physically navigating this environment. But there's things you didn't do. Like you didn't go look for him in the kitchen. You didn't go into the backyard. Or even to the backyard door. What else here? And the idea that it was not one of the two dogs that you had. It was this kind of third vague phantom dog in a way. The vague impression of so why not one of the two dogs that did exist? Why a third one? Why an imaginary dog? Why an extra character? There's something in there. I don't know if anything. How do you what thoughts come to mind with around your dogs?
Well, first they were both sound asleep.
Gotcha. Yeah. Fair enough.
And one loved him and the other would have followed me.
Okay.
But I can't imagine. They were old enough by then. They were past the stealing stage, unless it was food. Counter surfing is still a sport,
right? There's a reason puppy dog eyes exist. They work.
Yeah. I don't know. I know that at the time, his job was changing a bit. He was going from, or maybe he had just gone from being one of the workers to like an officer of the company. Gotcha. And one of the dogs that we had was given to us by his boss.
Okay.
And she's a nice lady, but the boy worked hours and hours and hours. It was nothing for him to be gone 13 hours and sometimes overnight, because he worked on computers. Those things go down. Everything has to stop. Yeah. You
gotta call the guy. Get the guy. Get him in here.
Get him in here.
Yeah.
So just that's the only connection I can make.
That's a good one. Sometimes just thinking about the circumstance, and I completely forgot to do this. What was going on in your life at the time? What were you experiencing? And that I'm so glad you came up with that on your own.
He was working a lot.
You were working a lot, and he was working a lot.
Well, he was working a lot, and I was not. I was kind of freelancing at the time.
Okay, so that is an interesting thing, though. The first thing I wrote down is that what is going on with your husband at that time is that his responsibilities are increasing, taking him away from the home for longer and longer hours, and he jumped up a level in, say, status. He's not as amazing as he was. He's now got an extra halo in this thing.
He's Mr. Professional now, boy.
Right?
Woo.
Yeah. So there's a sense of him separating from you in that maybe you had been approaching more of that relationship parity you were looking for, and he just jumped up. Again, I got to go higher. So for you, there's this, and then separated physically in the real world of he's gone long hours. He's not present. So you get this dream that seems like a representation of one of the qualities that you might say best represents him in general. This amazing memory storehouse of knowledge, this recording device, not just a tape. It's that's the condensed meaning or condensed representation of all these different things. And you also had the idea that the tape was streaming as the dog was carrying it. Now that's interesting too, which suggests that what is it when the tape gets pulled out of a cassette? It's damaged in some way. It's could damage the tape. I mean, it's not was protected. When we see that streaming tape, we think of cassettes that have been smashed and left on the street, and the wind blows this long ribbon all over the place. So there's something in there as well. I don't know all of that. I don't know if anything's coming to mind. Yeah.
I'm just thinking that he was getting more into management and further away from what he enjoyed doing. I mean, he's a very good manager. He's terrific at operations, but this was where he was kind of having to decide, do I want to stay with the practical day-to-day of it or become an office guy?
Because they are very different jobs. Yeah. And sometimes, well, this is what we were talking, links all the way back to the beginning. The people who have done the thing can then tell other people how to do it. So at some point you can keep your hands on building the thing, or you can start teaching, training, managing other people to do the hands-on. And it is a different skill set and a different application of things. So it's like you're not doing the job anymore. Now you're overseeing the job. So there's something, in a sense, destructive of that. You have to destroy or abandon the hands-on part to do in the process of moving to do something else. So there could be a representation there of this talent no longer being applied in the same way, this applied practice of his knowledge and ability. Could be that.
And perhaps my fear for him of, not continuing to pursue that which he's so curious about.
Is he going to be happy with this change? Is this what he really wants to do? Is it going to make the most of his talents? Wondering about that for sure.
Yeah, could well be. Yeah, I certainly hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, it could well be.
Yeah, and then there's this interesting. So actually, one of the dogs was given to you by
the boss,
who gave him the status raise to a new higher position. But you didn't imagine it was that dog specifically. It was this third imaginary dog, which what is it when we get things that are vague and don't actually exist but appear to be having an impact on us? I think of the future. I don't know why that came to mind. And it's like the future is something we know will arrive eventually, but it is always over there. The road moves, and that over there becomes the right here, but it's also vague. Even when we really understand cause and effect, and we can predict, and we can choose to a great degree where we're going to end up at that point. Until we actually get there, it's not real. It doesn't exist. So I don't know if any of this is making sense with this with the dog.
Yeah, because a few years later, our lives did change significantly. Because he left that job and was then trying to figure out what he wanted to do, as a 50-some-odd-year-old man. Yeah. Now what?
So did it turn out, would you say, that your concern about whether he'd be happy in that position was justified? Is that putting it the right way? Like, you were worried about whether he'd like it, and it turned out he really didn't. He was good at it, and he did it for a while. But
he did it for another 15 years. I mean, he was good at it.
That's a bit of time. Yeah.
But, I think the company was sold.
Oh, okay.
And they got rid of the C-suite. So he got to stay longest of all of them. But then he was at an age of, now what?
For sure.
And as a male, around 50, it gets a little harder, I think.
It can be, yeah. Well, when they're looking at candidates, they're like, this guy's going to retire in 10 years. We could get the kid who's 20 and he'll be here for 40 years.
And cheaper.
Yeah, and cheaper. Yeah, no, it's true. That's a real concern. And that's a juggling act a lot of businesses do too. Is this guy knows his stuff. He's been around. He could probably, run circles around that kid. We got to pay him what he's worth. But that's interesting. Okay, so it wasn't like your fears were immediately justified. He, did a 6-month turnaround and said, I hate this, I'm out. And that would be a different kind of circumstance. that would probably put the context of the dream more in a you trying to figure out whether your fear was justified, that he was going to enjoy this status, whether giving up something he was good at was going to succeed in that way. Yeah, something in there.
Well, again, he was in technology, and you get away from technology hands-on for 6 months, and
things change
a lot.
Yeah.
So years later, it's like, I can't do technology anymore because it's left me behind.
I went through a similar experience recently. Like, I've built every one of my own computers for years. I buy the parts, put them together. It had been a while since I built a machine, and I needed to get a new motherboard, new CPU, and a new video card, and make sure they all fit with the case I had, and the peripherals had a place to plug in. And I'm like, my old motherboard, I think, just died. There was no choice. I quit everything, or I get new equipment. And that was quite a learning process for me of like, what is good enough but not too expensive, and is it going to work together, and does that dang thing fit with the screws I've got? Man, there were so many variables. I did not want to do any of that, but I made it work. We're online, we're doing the thing. I know, right? But that is a very different, the time lapse of being out of the game for a while and then trying to update your skills into that. That's a big deal. It is interesting that you wanted to get it back. You had a lot of these expectational type of things, or you weren't a passive observer of the dream. A lot of times people do that. They just see ideas pass in front of them and they're not really interacting with it much. But this is all very driven on your thoughts and the desire to act on things. You felt a responsibility to safeguard it, and you felt like you needed to get it back. And that might, again, have to do with that closing the status gap again, too, to feel like an equal partner. That seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does, actually. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Makes sense to me. It's got to make sense to you, or it's pointless. I'm just going back through some. If you have random thoughts, you can throw them out anytime. I think we covered a lot of that different stuff. Anything that you're thinking, any element of the dream that came to mind in terms of additional detail of how things played out? It is very short.
It is very short.
You get out of the bed, you run down the stairs, you go to the garage, you're coming back up the stairs to look. You have this impression that you're chasing the dog, and you can kind of get glimpses of it, so you know where it's going, supposedly, so you know where to go to follow it. There wasn't you're behind, you're playing catch up, you're playing give me the ball back, but you weren't. How were you feeling during that whole time? Irritably determined, panicked, fearful, any emotional content?
Yeah, I think it's that general panic of, oh my gosh, I've got to take care of this immediately.
Okay.
And I think what often gets me up out of bed in a dream is, oh my gosh, what have I allowed to happen?
Gotcha. Right?
Because like with the parents coming and I haven't done something, or there's something on my side of our bed. Something grabs it, whether it's, I don't know, kittens, puppies, a Rubik's Cube, whatever, that I've let something get away with.
Gotcha.
So that's part of the theme of it, that runs across the years.
Yeah, we did. I forgot to go back to the theme, the idea of, yeah. And that these have decreased over time.
But that's when we recognized that it was about expectations. Yeah. They decreased after that session with my colleague of, you're afraid you're not making the cut. You're not meeting expectations. And that's what keeps you stirred up.
Gotcha.
And once we did that, I didn't walk in my sleep for like 6 months.
Wow. Just the realization of really nailing down what it was, or did it take
No,
a lot more thought?
That was
about
pretty
the concept?
immediate.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it was so it got me up out of my chair when we realized it, because I was like, oh my word. Psychology's fun.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and it has slowly filtered back in.
Hmm.
But again, once or twice a month rather than 3 or 4 times a week.
And honestly, we can't exist in the physical world with physical needs without any expectations. I mean, the idea that, well, I'm going to be hungry at some point, I'll probably need food. It's just an expectation you got to live with. There's some things you just can't avoid. So there's going to be problems to be dealt with. So
these are external expectations that I'm perceiving from others.
Yes. Yeah. And then the expectation of expectations involved in managing social relationships too. Like, because we're also, and those are invented in some ways. Invented's the wrong word, but we have an innate drive to be social, to be connected with people. We want to be loved and to love, and boundaries and expectations are huge. And managing those, finding people that, what is it? What's the idea of, good friends are people that accept you as you are and challenge you to be better in some ways. They say, well, it's not like saying you have no flaws. It's like saying your flaws aren't bad enough for me to ditch you. I think you're generally good otherwise. But, and then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to anticipate people's expectations and get ahead of the game. And we got to worry about being, leaning into people pleasing too much. And not having our own healthy boundaries. So these things are all intimately connected. Yeah. Well, I feel like, and this just might be me. Like, I feel like I want to give you a more revelatory experience, but we might have covered some of the bases of like why this specific imagery, what it related to in your waking life, experiences you were dealing with, and the concepts of your husband and his experience and your experience with him in that moment of time. I'm always willing to keep going longer if people are unsatisfied with the answer or have more to say or more questions. But sometimes these things, we get to the heart of it pretty quickly. Yeah. Yeah. That it sounds like you're kind of leaning into that. Like, yeah, sounds like we explored it sufficiently.
Who knows? There may be something comes up later on that makes it all make sense even more. But I mean, getting those images sorted out, because I was like, what is the deal with that stupid cassette tape? We hadn't had one of those in years.
Yeah, for sure. And then that's an interesting thing too, is like why there's a million questions and thoughts I wish I'd had and said. I go back and review these things in my mind. Talk about expectations. That's another great idea too, is that this was even in the age of CDs. Cassettes were old at the time this dream was new. So you're having this older representation of a memory storage device, this skill package. It wasn't a CD, which would actually make sense with the dog. You like throw a CD like a frisbee. Yeah. And it wasn't a Beanie Baby. It wasn't any of a dozen things it could have been. It was specifically a cassette. That's got to be a link to your past in some way, some experience of cassettes, what they mean to you more personally. I don't know if that's something you want to explore, or if it's just like, yeah, probably we shine it on.
Well, I have to confess, I got my first brand new car with my husband. And it had both a cassette and a CD player, because in 1999 we were still doing a little bit of both.
I remember those days. I do, yeah.
and he's still in my garage. I love this vehicle.
Okay.
Because it was exactly the thing that I wanted. And he's still running great.
Yeah. And that is another connection to, say, your past with your husband and that icon of an older, I don't know why the age of it feels linked to your husband as well too. It's like he's not an antique yet, but he dates back to the time of cassettes as well. It's like a powerful
Yeah.
icon maybe for him, as born in that era as well, or
Yeah,
in the transition between LPs to 8-tracks at least.
Yeah, he was instrumental in prying me out of all cassettes to move to some CDs at some point.
I remember those dates. I didn't trust them initially.
Yeah,
I thought cassettes were more,
solid.
yeah, right? It's probably like the people who still have records and they're just like, I don't trust that digital stuff. Fair enough. All right. Well, good. I think we've had a great conversation about so many things. And that's the way these go. I just talk to people. The dream's an excuse sometimes just to have a chat with people and get to have something interesting to say. But we got a little bit of an explanation for the imagery and the sequence of events and how important it is. And I guess we'll just wrap it up.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
good
you.
deal. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. And I'm going to say that again. This is our friend Renee Jones from Texas. She's a life coach specializing in lifestyle and weight loss stuff. PackYourOwnBag.com. Also, Pack Your Own Bag at Instagram and Facebook. And my housekeeping, hey, please stop what you're doing. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Books for sale, donations, coffee mugs, yada, yada. You get the deal. I'm just going to say to Renee, thanks for being here. It's been good talking to you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And everybody, thanks for listening.